This is Julie Bartolotto and Victoria Roa from the Historical Society of Long Beach interviewing Mayor Rex Richardson on Sunday, March 3rd, 2024 at his home in North Long Beach. So Rex, would you tell us a little bit about what brings you to Long Beach and to politics?
Sure. So I'm not originally from California. I was born on Scott Air Force Base in Belleville, Illinois. My father was in the Air Force. He was military police. My mother was a welder at General Motors, a union welder on the assembly line. She was from Alabama, and he was from St. Louis. When they divorced, we moved around a lot. She remarried to a gentleman who also worked on the assembly line at Ford, and they were both UAW. And so we moved, up and down the Midwest for a while, Detroit, St. Paul, all related to automotive industry. Eventually, we settled back down in Alabama, where my mother's from. Small town in Alabama called Reform in Pickens County, 1,500 people in the entire city. And we were in the suburb of that city with probably 400 people at most in that small area. This is the South where my mother grew up. She was, we had, my second grade teacher was her first grade teacher. It's a very small town. My fifth grade teacher was my aunt. Lots of family. The name down there was McCrary. That name for many, many years meant something because it goes back to my great-great-grandfather who was a sharecropper and acquired 640 acres. And that small area, people would call it McCrary Town because it was just, the McCrarys were the big landowners, African-American, very well respected. When I was 12 years old, or 11, turning 12, my mother, myself, my sister, who's a year older than me, and my younger brother, boarded a Greyhound bus moving to California, where my grandmother lived, my mother's mom, already lived in California. And so we boarded the Greyhound bus to come to California, and we landed out in the high desert, Apple Valley. So I went to Vista Campagna Middle School, and then ultimately, some additional schools out there, Silverado High School, Apple Valley High School, and then landed in Covina in 10th grade, Covina High School. We kind of put down roots, anchored roots there. My sister, she, is on the school board out there now. My mother's aunt, so my grandmother's sister, she came out here in the 50s and landed in the Glendora, Covina area. She owns and has founded the Charter Oak Day School. So they're really anchored out there. And so we sort of came and linked up with that family, started a new life here in California. We had a 2-bedroom apartment. When I was old enough, I worked at the Nickel Arcade and then at Jack in the Box for a minimum wage. My mom, when she came out here, she worked fast food at Arby's, and we all made minimum wage. My sister worked part-time at the stationery shop. We all made minimum wage. My job was to pay the light bill. My sister paid the phone bill. My mom paid the rent. I have a younger brother who's too young to work. He's 4 years younger than me. And then when the time came to go to college, my sister went to college first, and she went to Cal State Dominguez Hills. And so a year later, when I graduated high school, I figured, Cal State Dominguez Hills sounds good to me because, my sister was already there. I visited a few times and met some of her friends. And so I knew some people there, and I figured we were both first-generation students. We should stick together. I applied to some other universities. I didn't get into Long Beach State. They were very impacted that year. And if you're not a college promise student, it's sometimes hard to get in. And so I didn't get in there, but I did get into Cal State Dominguez Hills. I got there. I wanted to get really involved. I started identifying who were the students that looked like they were going someplace because my mother always raised us to grow up and get an education. No one can ever take it away from you. Figure out how to pay for it because we're not rich. And she had a big message on economic mobility. And so when we got to college, it was like it's time to figure this thing out. So we got there. I got involved in clubs and organizations. I created a club called the Black Business Student Association. So I was a founder of that club. And I just started getting involved in leadership. I got involved in student government.
What was your major?
Initially, it was business. Until maybe my third year there, I took a philosophy class, and I really enjoyed it, and I changed my major to philosophy. I got involved in student government, and I worked on campus. I initially worked I applied to Jack in the Box and didn't get the job. So even though I had 17 months in Covina, I figured, this is this should be a no-brainer. Didn't get the job. So I bounced around different jobs. I worked in the instructional media center on campus. So dealing with computers and computer labs and videos and stuff like that. I was a tech guy. I was the tech squad on campus. And I worked at a bank in downtown Long Beach on Pine. I think it was a Cal National Bank at the time. Now I think it's like City National Bank. I worked at Best Buy in Lakewood. And then I became the campus marketing manager for Coca-Cola. That was fun. That was a job. It was an internship. I did that for a little more than a year. That was fun. And I was involved in student government, very involved. So I was the lower division representative. First, I was the small business school representative. Then I was the lower division representative. And then I ran for student body president in 2005. I met my wife there at Cal State Dominguez Hills. She was the technology assistant, so a staff member. And she staffed the technology committee that I chaired. And but we did not date then. We didn't date back then. She had a boyfriend. He was the elections commissioner. And she was the homecoming queen the year I was president. But we were all friends. All of us were in the same friend group. And eventually I ran for student body president. We were really involved in student tuition, fighting against student tuition increases at that time. Schwarzenegger was the governor. Mayor Bob Foster was not mayor yet. He was on the CSU Board of Trustees. I would go and protest Bob Foster back then when he was on the Board of Trustees. It was kind of interesting that one mayor was speaking to another mayor through time, right? Yeah. And neither of us knew we were going to be mayor next. I don't know if he knew he was going to be mayor, but I sure didn't know I was going to be mayor at the time. But there was the LA Times story of me and him going back and forth, which was pretty interesting. Became student body president, joined my fraternity Alpha Phi Alpha, and toward the end of my term, so I was really involved. Now I was involved in statewide student government, which is called Cal State Student Association. So I really followed the state budget. Advocacy was important. I was really good at advocating for the students. That's where Cal State Dominguez Hills is really where, I became an organizer, an advocate. I was engaged with the student government, but also the faculty union a bit. And, and sort of toward the end of my term, I needed a job because you get a stipend as president. And as I was coming to the end of that term, I really needed a job. I ended up, I was at a fraternity meeting, and one of my fraternity brothers, Al Austin, came to a fraternity meeting and was recruiting volunteers to go and knock on doors for a candidate for state assembly who was on the Long Beach City Council. And the assembly district encompassed where Cal State Dominguez Hills was. Who was coming to that? This candidate was Mayor Richardson. Mm-hmm. And so I approached Al. I'd known him for a while. And he had his stuff together. He was really in politics. I looked up to him a lot. I went to him and said, "Hey, I need a job. Like I've volunteered a lot. I volunteered for Juanita McDonald. I volunteered for John Kerry for president. I loaded up buses of students from Dominguez Hills, took them out to Vegas to campaign for John Kerry. I said, but this time I need a job. I can't do it for free. My stipend's ending." He said, "Okay, I'll introduce you to the candidate." So that Sunday that Sunday afternoon we went to Big Spino's Cafe, and I had my little cousin with me. I remember he was with me for the weekend, and went in, met her. She said, "Hey, I got this little phone bank in Carson. Would you mind taking it over and turning it into a walk program?" "Sure. How many walkers can you recruit?" I said, "How many do you need?" She said, "Can you do 50? Can you do 100? I said, "Sure." And she says, "I can only pay them $10. I said, "Wait, you can pay them?" I thought this was all free because everything we had done was volunteer work. So that was the first paid campaign I worked on. We were successful. We organized a lot of students to come out and knock on doors in Carson. We all wore CSUDH gear or Greek paraphernalia or, a polo shirt. And we went out and knocked on doors, and our rap was really simple. It was, we're students right here at Cal State Dominguez Hills. Tuition's increasing, and Laura Richardson is going to help us fight to keep our tuition stable. And it was a compelling message. And we won, and it showed that the operation that we had, the Carson operation, is where we kind of ran up the score. And so we won. I got a phone call after that from a guy named Sam Rodriguez, and no, actually it was Jerry Guzman initially. Jerry Guzman called, and he was leading the California Democratic Party Victory 2006 coordinated campaign here in Southern California. And he said, hey, I heard you did a good job on this campaign. You beat us, because at that time, the candidate that I was helping, Laura Richardson, she didn't have the Democratic Party endorsement. She didn't have the Labor Fed endorsement. So we were the underdogs in many ways, and we won. So he called and said, hey, I heard you were kind of behind that work that was done in Carson. It was really impressive. You galvanized all those college students. It's like, yeah, we did. He said, well, you want to come work for the Democratic Party? Sure, I need a job. Absolutely. So he offered me a job to come run the Long Beach office for Phil Angelides for governor. And this office was on Wardlow and Orange. Inside the building now is Blackbird Cafe, but before it was the Victory 2006 coordinated campaign. So I was hired. I was able to bring on a volunteer coordinator. So I asked my vice president in student government, Rashina Young, to be my volunteer coordinator. So she came over as volunteer coordinator, and we organized, and that's how I got to know local Long Beach Democrats like Eric Bradley and Brian Menegino and all of these people who were the local Democratic Club establishment, and Betty Carnett and all of these people. And they were very welcoming. Long Beach was a very cozy place, very tight-knit, and they welcomed me in. I ended up, after that, the campaign, we weren't successful. Phil Angelides never became the governor. But a lot of the organizers from Victory 2006 went right into a strike campaign for California Faculty Association. So a lot of the campaign staff shifted right into a statewide organizing effort to authorize the first strike in CSU history. And so I landed a job there, right? I still needed a job, and it happened to be in Long Beach, where at this point I got an apartment in Long Beach. I got an apartment in Long Beach in Bixby Knolls and Banner Drive, 1 bedroom. It was $900 a month. The garage was an extra $100. And so that's where I lived, and I worked on campus at Cal State Long Beach for the CFA. And we organized that strike, and I learned a little bit more about the labor movement when I was working for CFA. I knew about the faculty union from my time as a student, but I had never worked there. And what I learned was there are a lot of similarities from sitting across the table as a college student, advocating for student fees and student tuition, and all those things. It's very similar sitting across the table with management, negotiating, wages, working conditions, benefits, standards. And so a lot of my skills were transferable, and organizing was transferable. So once I got to CFA, I learned more about the labor movement, and they are a part of the California State Council of SEIU. And so once you're in the SEIU network, I began to look at other opportunities within the SEIU network. And I applied to be a worksite organizer at SEIU 721. It's the biggest union in LA County, represents LA County workers, LA City workers. This was 2007. And so 2007, I was hired to be a worksite a union rep. I was assigned to South Los Angeles County, public works employees that were advocating for boots, probation workers like Long Beach Probation Office, animal service, animal care and control is what it was called in the county. So I had a certain amount of departments, and I had to organize workers there. And I was 22 maybe. So I was maybe 22. And in the labor movement, I learned a lot. It was one of the most diverse places I've ever been. And I went to a very diverse university. It's diverse, but it's not integrated. The labor movement is very diverse and very integrated. So, I became good friends with, folks in the Korean community. I developed great relationships with LGBTQ sisters, brothers, siblings. It was Native American folks, organizers, and we all worked together. And so I had a real awakening in the labor movement about just collective power and collective voice. I worked there for about 3 years. It was there where I started. It was a very exciting time when I was there. Barack Obama was a senator that was rising star, labor friendly, senator. Everyone was talking about this guy could be president. And I was working for a union that had resources and had endorsed them. And so I was very excited. I had an opportunity to go out to New Hampshire for initially John Edwards. Some states had endorsed Obama, some had endorsed Edwards. And California at the time had endorsed Edwards. So I had gone to New Hampshire to campaign for John Edwards. But many of us, when the shift was over, we would shift over and go volunteer for Barack Obama. So I was in New Hampshire.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was people were excited to just be in New Hampshire. So I would do my time early in the morning leafleting for John Edwards. And when the clock stopped, me and a couple of folks, was off work, we'd go put in a couple hours on the phone for Barack Obama in New Hampshire. And it was negative 30-degree weather. It was cold. We worked hard. And we were really inspired when we saw that he won the Iowa caucuses. Then I was able to take a team of members to Texas, to Houston, Texas, and help manage a member-to-member and independent expenditure campaign for Barack Obama in the primary with Hillary Clinton. And so that I was able to spend some time in Houston. It was great. The food was really good. The freeway system was strange. But I got to meet Barack Obama when I was there. I got to staff him for a day. And this was, to me, this was like very inspirational, right? So I got to staff him at a veterans roundtable. I was the guy holding the microphone so people could talk, basically. And he was sitting in the middle of a circle of veterans, taking questions, and I'm walking around with the mic. And afterward, got to take a photo with him, got to talk to him a little bit. What did I talk about? TV shows. We talked about The Wire. Because I read online that it was one of his favorite shows, and at the time it was my favorite show. So we talked about The Wire. Fast forward, I ended up becoming a delegate to the DNC 2008 for Barack Obama. That's when I applied to do Leadership Long Beach, but I couldn't do it because the retreat fell on the same time as the Democratic National Convention. So I didn't get in that year. I got accepted, then kicked out, Leadership Long Beach. But I went the next year. Easy choice, yes. Right? So this was history, right? I had to run for this. This was the first thing I ran for in Long Beach was delegate. It was two slates. That was sort of the City Hall slate. It was James Johnson, Sam Hall, and Lillian Kawasaki versus me and Steve Neal and Yvonne Wheeler. And that's how I met Steve Neal. I was working at SEIU. I wanted to be a delegate. I didn't know anybody running, and you have to form a slate. So I went to Jerry Vaughn, who was my director at the time, and said, do you know anyone on this list? Yeah, I know Steve Neal. I know Yvonne. They're good people. Call them, see if they have a slate. If so, see if you can join. So I called, hey, Steve, I'm Rex. I'm with SEIU. I see you're running for delegate. You need any help? No, just me and Yvonne. We're figuring it out. You have a slate? No. Would you like to join my slate? Oh, who's on your slate? You're the first. So we the three of us ran, and James Johnson, I got the top spot. James Johnson got the second spot, and the race for the women was Lillian Kawasaki versus Yvonne Wheeler, and Yvonne won, and Lillian was the alternate. And so James is number 2, didn't get in, and Steve Neal didn't get in. So there was a little bit of drama about that, like how did one person on the slate get in, not the other? Really, James was talking to our people. Everyone who walked up, James would shake their hand, ask for their vote. So he was out there working it. So to James's credit, he edged out a few extra votes. That's basically what happened.
And you did.
Yeah, well, you remember, were you there for that? I don't remember if you were there for that, but I was out shaking hands. So. Okay, no, so we were out. Basically, we brought buses full of students, labor folks, all that, and you basically stand out there and shake as many hands as you can and say you can vote for up to 4 people. Can I be one of your 4? That's what you say. You hand him a slate card, and that's that. All your supporters vote your slate. But if it's somebody who didn't come with you, you'll hand them a slate card, but you're just introducing yourself, right? So James was introducing himself to every one of our people, and I was introducing myself to all of his people. And so that's just how it happened. So I won, became a delegate.
So that means you beat out Steve Neal.
Well, I don't want to say it that way. There were some feelings because we had just got to know each other at the time. But yeah, that's. I wouldn't say we were on the same slate. You don't beat your slate partners, right? Okay. But the election was at
more votes.
Yeah, I had more than James, Steve, everybody. I was the top vote getter. I organized a bunch of college. I was always been an organizer. So the district that you run in had Cal State Dominguez Hills in it, and so we bust college students in, and we had a big barbecue, and Steve grilled. Steve was on the grill, and it was great. It was great. So that was the first thing I got elected to in Long Beach, top vote getter.
Can you tell me who your mentors were at that point?
At that time, Al Austin, and folks from campus like Guy Witherspoon and stuff like that. Those are my mentors. I just got to know Steve Neal. So I met him through this process.
Great.
Then we became friends, and I remember Steve had already run for city council in 2006. I didn't live in Long Beach in 2006. So I didn't know that, right? And after the election, like, we were walking on campus that day, and he's like, "Hey man, you did a really good job." He's like, and Steve's a very spiritual guy, right? And he says, "I see elected office in your future." And I was like 22, 23, right? And so I'm like, dude, I just got an apartment here. Like, I've lived in, 6 different states. I went to 14 schools. I'm not grounded anywhere. He's like, "Look, I'm going to run again. I'm trying it out, but I see something in you going to go far." And I remember that. And we became friends. I called him to work on a project at work at SEIU to start a food bank in South LA. Everyone said, "Call Steve. He runs the United Way program at the United Way program at the Labor Fed, the LA County Federation of Labor." And the thing, he was the guy people would call if you're on strike and people need food or bills paid. Steve was like, he was the heart of the organization, right? He was the one that helped people. And so I needed him to show me how to do it, because there's all these standards. You can't keep food on the floor. You can't have this, do that. And we did it, right? We set up a food bank program for Parks and Rec employees to help serve the community in South LA. And then Steve ran for city council again. And at this point, I had been at SEIU about 3 years. I had just bought a house in North Lawn in the 9th District. I didn't know it was the 9th District at the time. I knew Jerry Caligiuri. I didn't know Val Lurch. I knew Jerry from Leadership Long Beach, because I did Leadership Long Beach program that following year. And so basically, Steve was running. I would just show up, because I had a lot of campaign experience at the time. I would just show up to his office and like, "What's going on with this? What's going on with that?" Check, make sure everything looks good, make sure volunteers are coming in, and just check it out. And during that campaign, I would check in with Steve a lot. After he won, he asked me to help lead his transition team, because I had just finished Leadership Long Beach, and basically he wanted me to help figure out a transition. We figured out like a pancake breakfast with We Love Long Beach and stuff like that. And there was another group that was vetting staff for Steve, helping him, introduce him to staff. And I didn't know that they were looking at me to join his staff. So at some point, Steve invites me over to Starbucks inside Target, because there's no coffee shop at the time. There was no Starbucks or anything like that in the 9th District. And he's like, "Hey, North Long Beach doesn't have this, doesn't have that. I owned a home to me, great community. I got a front yard, backyard. All my rooms were rented out to fraternity brothers at the time. It was basically a frat house." And he's like, we don't have a library, we don't have a bank, the only district without a bank, don't have a coffee shop. And the answer is organizing. I want to run a community empowerment model. I need an organizer on my staff. You're the best organizer I know. So what do you think about coming on over? I originally said, I'm kind of good where I'm at. I really like being at SEIU. I think the trajectory is somewhere else. I'm going to work for the governor one day, something like that. And, he was like, "Well, think about it, pray on it." And I did. And I talked to and at the time, folks were trying to organize, we were all trying to organize Al Austin to be his chief of staff. And for whatever reason, that didn't work out. And so, Al and my mom both were like, "Hey, you should really think about going in as the chief of staff." So I went back to Steve. I was like, "Hey, I know you said come work for you as an organizer. The only thing that makes sense is if I come," because it didn't make sense. I didn't understand the value of working in the community he lived in yet. I was 25, 26, so I didn't fully understand it. Steve said, "Yeah, I want you to lead the team." I thought I was clear about that. I was like, oh, I wasn't clear. You said come be an organizer. I've been an organizer. He was like, no, I want you to be the chief of staff. I was like, okay, great. Let's do it, right? So came on board as chief of staff. Now, the transition between Val Lurch, which I was just getting to know Val. I knew Jerry, who was Val Lurch's field rep. I didn't know Val. The relationship was pretty tense in North Long Beach because Steve had run against Val twice, and he finally won on Val's write-in. And so when he came in, there was a bunch of neighborhood leaders who just weren't very welcoming and receptive to Steve initially. So we knew that we had some work to do to kind of get the doors open. We hired a good staff. Majority of the staff lived in the district. It was Floyd Hampton Livingston, lived in the 9th District, grew up in the 9th District. He was the communication organizer, district communication organizer, right? We had Carrie Faithful, and Carrie came over, and she lived in the Star King neighborhood, so she was in the district. And it was me, and then we brought one other person over from the Labor Fed. She stayed about a year and then left. And so we had a good team that was like rooted and based in the district. And Ricardo Linares was there. He was the field rep. He came from Tonia's office. So he was, we brought him over from Tonia's office. So this is our team of 4. We wanted to, me and Steve basically went into like a 3-hour meeting with just me and him. And we planned out the first year, right? He said he wanted to, so we came up with a program called the Building a Better 9th District Community Program. And essentially it was broken into 4 phases. The first phase was like his first 6 months in the office, like the transition in office. We called it imagination, infrastructure, and involvement, right? Imagination was capture the imagination, do visioning of the community. Infrastructure was not about streets and sidewalks. It was about what infrastructure do we need to organize this community. So we need a district newsletter. We need, a website. We need this, we need that. And then involvement was really a value or a principle that we're going to involve residents in every aspect of our work. And that really came from the principle of community empowerment. Community empowerment is essentially, if you want to make a change in the community, the most sustainable way and most direct way to do it is to really, basically empower the local residents and train them to be change makers themselves. There are other models when you would say bring in nonprofits and they would parachute in and bring all these resources. The challenge is when that happens, when that grant cycle is up, they have to justify doing the grant again. So they go do research to justify the problem is still there. It leads to negative self-image and perception issues that persist in a community. Whereas the community, if you empower them to make the change, they want to see the change happen rapidly because they are on the front line. So that was our philosophy. So imagination, infrastructure, involvement, we started this program called District Captains, where the old guard wasn't necessarily engaging with us. Some were, some weren't. So we needed to get new voices. So we started simply by every week in the newsletter, we would highlight a district captain. What is a district captain? It's a resident who lives in the community and makes one commitment to do something to improve the community. Just one thing, right? I'm going to join my neighborhood association. I'm going to attend a training. I'm going to join a city commission. I'm going to host a cleanup. And we would highlight them. It would be them, the neighborhood they live in, a quote about leadership, and a little bit about them. And we did it for 50 weeks straight. So we rolled out in that first year 50 district captains, right? Then we hosted trainings for them. That was the infrastructure piece. Hosted district captain training. A lot of really good people came out of the program. Joni and her husband, Keith, came out of that program. Sabrina Sanders, she was a district captain. Manny Walker became the president of the Houghton Park Association. He was a district captain. Esmeralda Flanagan, she became district captain and became the president of the DeForest Park Association. So all these leaders that essentially were my age. And the reason they were my age was because the bubble had just burst in North Long Beach and housing prices got really cheap. And so everyone was able to buy a home. I bought my first home for $275,000, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. My mortgage was the cost that I was paying in rent. And so a lot of folks bought their first homes and these families moved in and began to take over. And Steve ended up kind of being the guy everybody liked. Everybody liked Steve. Everyone got involved. So the next few years, we kept rolling out the phases. So after imagination, infrastructure, involvement, the second phase for year 2 of office was discover, design, develop. Discover was about asset-based framing. Instead of talking about North Long Beach from a deficit frame, let's discover all the assets we do have. Let's talk about what's great about the old Fire Station 12 or the history of Houghton Park or all these things, right? Design was not about like how are we going to design this building, but what are our designs for the district? What are our plans? We began to talk about a North Long Beach open space master plan. We began to talk about, all these, like, there was a lack of planning to address the challenges. So we began doing that. And we got really involved with the health department and started doing a lot of health planning around healthy corner stores. We met someone named Shauna Stevens, who was the healthy corner store coordinator, healthy neighborhood market program coordinator. And we worked really closely with Shauna Stevens and Ron Herrera in the health department. And Ron was very close with Steve, and I met Shauna, became very close with Shauna. And then that was designed, and then develop our leaders. Let's take it to the next step, right? Let's develop our leaders. So that's when we did more training. Third phase, partnership, progress, possibility. Partnership. How do we create organizations that become vehicles to help drive our progress beyond just a few neighborhood leaders? So that's when we began organizing around creating the Uptown Business District. That's when we started working to attract organizations up there. Long Beach CAP moved up to North Long Beach. Long Beach Opera moved up to North Long Beach. This is when we started really exploring partnerships, right? Progress was like, okay, we're making some, we don't want to lose any momentum with what we've done these last few years. So progress was like, let's keep our progress. And possibility was like, okay, North Long Beach has some pep in its step. Let's start to think big. What are the projects that were impossible and now we need to start taking on? What are the real possibilities? That's when we began to talk about redoing the Houghton Park Community Center, because before they said, oh, this is going to be $10 million, too much money, right? Or, that's when we began just taking on bigger challenges, long-standing issues that had plagued North Long Beach for a long time. And then the fourth phase was reach, reform, realize. Reach was about how far can we reach into the community? We have district captains. We've got a newsletter now with thousands of subscribers. We've got neighborhood associations in every part of the district now. We went from about 4 or 5 to 12 or 13 neighborhood associations. So it was all about reach, really organizing, empowering the district. We had momentum. We're in the process of designing the New North Long Beach Library, like a lot of momentum. And then, so it was reform was like, now let's institutionalize some of the changes we were seeing. How do we reform things? Liquor store reform took off. The alcohol nuisance abatement ordinance, which was championed by us, ended up winning 2 American Planning Association awards and became a model citywide for modernizing liquor stores. And so that happened in that year was when we began to get that recognition. So we were putting in systems. And then realize was like, okay, we've been planting a lot of seeds. Let's start seeing them blossom now. How can we realize some of the change? And so, there were projects that I'll tell you took a long, long time. Steve Neal talked about improving Artesia Boulevard in his swearing-in speech. And he said, it's shameful, the condition of Artesia Boulevard. Uptown should be a preview to downtown. I remember it like it was yesterday. And we kept that theme. And so we were finally making moves on Artesia Boulevard, which is interesting because it's finally under construction now to be done next summer. This was 2010. It's 2024 and the project's almost finished, right? That's how long it takes to get things done. So anyway, around that time, we were organizing all that. We had built some power on the council. We did this thing called Job Summit. We did it every year, and we would talk about bigger issues in the economy. This was Steve Neal's Job Summit called Getting Back to Work. And I remember we did this video after the first one, and it says, but there's hope at the end, right? And then it zooms in on Al Austin, who's like, at the time, thinking about running for city council, right? And it was a big nod from Steve to Al that he needs to be next, right? So 2012, that's when we all organized. We all organized to, like, redistricting had happened in 2011. And basically, we saw the numbers that the largest population of African Americans was in Council District 8. And we encouraged Al, take a look at this. And others participated, firefighters and police officers, things like that, participated, and we encouraged Al to run, and it was a lot of good partnership early on. And I remember like Uduak was on a scooter for 3-4 weeks in the Carmelitos every day, knocking on doors for Al, and I was in the office, doing all that stuff. So it was a lot of work. So Al had won the city council 2 years after Steve.
What was your role with Al's campaign?
Well, Al ran twice. So he ran in the 6th district right after Laura won the assembly race. And I was
2007.
This was special election 2007. And this was I think right before I went to California Faculty Association. So this was after the Democratic Party and before California Faculty Association. Yeah, I think it was, or I might have that part out of order. But anyway, I was the deputy campaign manager on that campaign. So I was basically the day-to-day guy on Al's campaign in 2006. We were unsuccessful. DeAndrews won and served a very long time. But me and Al were very, very close. And Steve, when Steve was right there in the mix as well. We were all very close. And so when Steve got on the council, it was a big priority for us to make sure that we had a good partner in the 8th district, because 8 and 9 were very close. So we were all in on helping make the case for Al to take a look at that seat. But also, once he was in, working hard every day to make sure that it was successful. 2014 comes around. There's a big conversation about state assembly. Steve was redistricted into the seat that represented. Steve was before we were in the district with Compton and North Long Beach, and then we got thrown into the district with Carson, right? And basically it was a very, very crowded field. Steve ran for the assembly. We all worked as hard as we could, but Steve didn't make it, right? And at the same time, we needed to make sure there was a good succession plan in the 9th district. And so basically when Steve ran for the assembly, I ran for city council. We had one guy in the race. It was Val's candidate, and what was his name? I can't think of it. Ben, no, not Ben. I gotta look at my stuff. But anyway, ran for city council. We won. It was 73.2%. So it was a good win.
Wow.
And so so we won. According to the clerk, I am the youngest. I was the youngest council member in the city's history. I never fact checked that. This is what contemporary knowledge is, right? Because there could have been somebody 100 years ago that was also 30, right? So I was 30 years old, and I ran for city council, and I won. Fun fact, I kicked off my campaign the week after me and Nina got back from our honeymoon, because she and I got together when I started working for Steve, and so we were dating, and we got engaged and got married, and the week we got back, kicked off the campaign. We won. Election night party was at Sal's Gumbo Shack. That's when we announced that Nina was pregnant, and then at the inauguration a few months later, that's when we announced we were having a girl. So I got on the city council. I've been telling a lot of stories. Want me to pause here?
Yeah, actually, we're coming
Okay.
up to the 40-minute
Sure.
All right.
mark, so we can take a little break.
All right, good.
Does it look like that's going, Rex?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
All right, you want me to start?
One of my questions was, were you successful while you were working for Steve Neal in bringing the old guard in?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think we were. I think we ultimately there were some folks that weren't interested in building that relationship, but a lot of folks did get on board. Dan Pressburg got on board, right? He ran against Steve, and he was on board on day one. Eileen Oyen, she is still the president of St. Francis Association today. She was the president way back then in 2010, and she's still the president today. She lives across the street. So she got right on board. There were some folks that were not they were old guard, but not they weren't sweating it. Some people, it was really easy. Like the Star King groups and College Square, Linda Wilson, Jimmy, some of the guys from Star King and all that. Some folks never got on board. Coolest Triangle, Dave San Jose never got on board. He never got on board with Steve, never got on board with me. There was nothing we could do that was right. But I think there was some mutual respect, especially after Dave's heart attack. We all kind of empathized with Dave, and so there was a little bit of mutual respect there. Val, I came to build a really, really good relationship with Val, and so did Steve. Val became like a good mentor for me, so yeah. And people love Val Lurch.
Yeah. People
love Val Lurch. And his family got really cool. Mike Mounts, he passed away, but Mike Mounts, he got on board. He was, there in the video I sent you, he says, man, Steve, at the end, that video, he says, man, Steve Neal, he's done so much for the district, right? So there were people that were kind of old guard that got on board. There were some who just kind of just transitioned out, hung it up and said, I'm just not going to be that involved anymore. But it wasn't very many people.
Yeah. So my question was along those same lines. How would you define old guard? Because from my understanding is that it's more, I guess, conservative politics. So
citywide old guard is different than the old guard I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. We're talking about North Long Beach old guard. These are the folks that built the Veterans Day Parade. Okay. These are people who really reinforced veterans, stood up for veterans a lot, right? Mm-hmm. Martha Tinte, some of those folks, and Barbara Bolin, and a lot of those folks. Jerry Schultz, who's the East Long Beach 5th District guy now. But those folks were like the old guard, right? Okay. And some of their staff. That was it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How does race play
and many of them passed away now.
Into this?
How did race play into it?
Into who's old
Well,
guard
I think here's what Steve Neal's election really represented. North Long Beach back then was 92% people of color. Steve was the first person of color, black, Latino, anything to represent anything in North Long Beach, a school board seat, a college board seat, anything. So there was certainly a racial lens there. And the sentiment was, the things we would hear initially was, he'll be here, he's not going to be here long. No one cares about North Long Beach but us. All these people have moved here since we've been here. We've been here. They've all moved here. And since they moved here, things have gotten worse. And they don't care about the community we do. And our philosophy was, hey, we don't agree with that. The community is teeming. We're just teeming with leadership and teeming with potential. We just have to know how to unlock it. And that was the philosophy of community empowerment that really was the catalyst for North Long Beach. So race did necessarily have and after that, I think if we just think citywide, Steve was the first black person to be elected outside the Central Long Beach area. So every council member from 1970 all the way to 2010 had only been elected there in District 6. So Steve, showing that you can run and you can win in the 9th district, which was not predominantly black, showed it really encouraged people to look in other areas. And it only took 2 years for someone to run in the 8th district and win. And so within 2 years, Long Beach went from 1 district to three districts represented by African Americans. And so Steve really represented that moment. And I think even when you think about everything happening here, the first Cambodian, that door was kind of opened by Steve opening up the playbook for African Americans citywide. That kind of opened up the opportunity there. I think, Robert was also a trailblazer, first Latino mayor, and he opened up the door for Lena, right? The way Steve opened the door for me and Al and Uduak, right? So I think that was just a moment of a moment of empowerment.
And then I guess my other question is, you mentioned that there was a younger demographic coming in to North Long Beach when you were on, Steve's chief of staff. Do you think that played a role also in, the support and also the community empowerment movement?
100%. So the folks who had moved in were homeowners. These were young families buying homes for $200,000. And they wanted to be involved. Home ownership that's why I'm such a big proponent for home ownership. Yeah. It brings a perspective that I'm invested. I want to make this community. I can't pick up and just leave. I'm invested here. I want to fix this problem, right? I remember this guy, Manny, who became a real good friend. Manny's issue was his alley. And there hasn't been a dedicated alley paving program in Long Beach in decades. And his thing was his alley. He went out, he surveyed it himself. He was going to do a mellow ruse with his neighbors, and they were going to pay for it. He did so much organizing around the alley. He ended up getting his alley paid. He organized it. He did all this. He got his alley paid. He was empowered. He was a homeowner, right? Yeah. And so that bubble, the crash, 2008, opened up housing opportunities. It was also a hard time. Like one of Steve's first pieces of legislation was the foreclosure registry in Long Beach, because a lot of the foreclosures were not looking good. They were in bad shape. And so we created a registry that would fine banks for not keeping up their properties, right? And it ended up being a big generator for the city. So yeah, but that created so the way it worked back to the city? Yeah, so here's the way it worked. If you foreclose, you have to pay a registration fee to the city for us to monitor it. And if it gets out of shape, you got to pay $1,000 a day, bank, for not keeping that property out of shape, because there were foreclosures all over the place. I bought my first house. It was one of those. It was a foreclosure. I bought a short sale, and so a lot of people who bought got involved. So that deficit of leadership that people were complaining about, the economy fixed it. It opened up the door to fresh blood. And then what you found was a lot of people were also, this is an important point, a lot of people were jaded with the city of Long Beach. In the 90s, and this came up I heard this so much working in the 9th District. North Long Beach Police was contracted out to LA County Sheriffs, but not the rest of the city, so the North Division. And this hurt, like people felt hurt, like they were cut off from the city, like we're a stepchild of the city, right? So that was still reverberating when we came in. And so, I think a lot of people who had given up on the city, the empowerment model welcomed them back in, right? To say, hey, this is different. This feels different. And when I came into office, frankly, a lot of the work, my successes in my first term were all teed up during Steve's term. The Michelle Obama Library, that was already designed. We just had to fund it and name it, right? Fund it, build it, and name it, right? Half the battle was done. We found the rest of the funding. We got it done. We got it delivered, on time and under budget. And we named it, we engaged with youth and named it the Michelle Obama Library, even though the Press Telegram editorial board said, do not name it after Michelle Obama. But history, we were on the right side of history there. The Houghton Park Community Center work. Steve opened up the conversation on the Houghton Park Community Center. I was the one who found the funding to actually get it done and build it, but Steve kicked the conversation off. Artesia Boulevard, it's under construction now. I worked on it my entire 8 years on the council, and we ended up getting $43 million to do the project. It was fully funded and in the works when I handed the district over to Joni.
Will you talk more about that funding?
Yeah, so basically, my first action as a council member was to work with the Gateway Cities COG to do a study, with the 6 cities between the LA River and the San Gabriel Valley River on Artesia. And it was about creating one plan, a committee of those 6 cities. So I formed that committee, and we began doing the initial study. Once we got that study done, we worked with the Gateway Cities COG. Then we applied to a Metro call for projects, and we got $5 million to do the project, right? $5 million isn't going to do the project, right? But we got approved for $5 million, and then I got involved in SCAG, Southern California Association of Governments, and that's a regional planning agency. I ultimately became the president of the agency. 6 counties, 191 cities, 19 million people, and they gave us resources to do the Uptown plan. That's the land use plan, the master plan for North Long Beach. And they gave us the initial tranche of resources. And they gave us resources to highlight Artesia Boulevard project. So we did an open street project. It was called Activate Uptown, closed down Artesia Boulevard, brought people out to talk about mobility. And we did a big concert on Artesia. We had Talib Kweli, The Far Side, MC Supernatural, Murs, Vince Staples made an appearance. Like this was, it was pretty incredible. And we just continued chipping away at the funding until we got to the point where we had the $40 million to go. And then we broke ground on the project. Like, that was the first project we broke ground on as mayor. So yeah, that project Steve talked about in 2010 when he talked about this in 2010 when he was sworn into office. So that's a big transformative project. It's, it's new pedestrian lighting and, bulb outs. It makes it safer. Atlantic and Artesia is one of the most unsafe intersections in the city. You have Jordan High School and right up the street, Star King Elementary School. Lots of accidents, and it's on a main and main. And the whole point was to really stitch the community back together, make it safer for, people who live in the community. So that also went along with the Uptown plan, which is the land use plan. It started with rezoning Artesia, rezoning Atlantic. This is something I campaigned on for my re-election, was we need a long-term plan for North Long Beach. So we did that. First phase was there. Second phase is the rest of North Long Beach. It's pretty much done, the second part of Up plan. So when you fix the zoning and you've paved the street and do the public right-of-way, it sets the stage for the private sector to also bring new business and all that. So you see new housing and all those things popping up on Artesia.
Did you say bulb out?
Bulb outs. So what a bulb out is, when you go to an intersection, to cross the street, you have to cross the area where typically someone would park, and then you cross the street. It's, what if you extend the sidewalk to cover where traditionally someone would park? Then the distance you have to cross the street is shorter. So statistically less accidents. So so you create a little bulb at every intersection, right? And you landscape it and all that. So a lot of this was done, and Suja really led on a lot of this stuff. A lot of this was done in downtown and those other areas, but not up here. So now you're seeing really the results of a lot of long-term planning. Artesia Boulevard, Market Street, Atlantic, all the work that has taken place and is currently taking place is a result of long-term planning. Yep. Good stuff.
No, those were my big ones.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right.
Should we go back to go to city politics?
Yeah, let's go.
So there was redistricting in 2010, and there's charter reform. How do those things?
Charter reform in 2010.
Charter reform later in 2018, right? BBB. All of the
realigning election dates. That wasn't charter reform, but yeah, we did that.
Does that?
Okay. Yes.
How does that interact with many of the things that we've talked about that we're going to talk about after this?
So I think 2010, with the election of Steve Neal and the first black person elected outside the Central Long Beach area, I mentioned it kind of opened things up. But there was also this invisible ceiling of black folks not being able to run citywide. And there's always been this theme that citywide office runs through East Long Beach, through the 3rd district. You cannot get elected citywide unless you run through the 3rd district. Well, the 9th district couldn't be more different than the 3rd district. And so there was a sense of, don't even try it. Like, you got to be kidding me. Like, don't even think about it, right? And the reason why that is because in Long Beach, at the time, we held our elections in April and in June. And that's called an off-cycle election. If you have an off-cycle election, your turnout would be about 25% of what it would have been if your primary is at the same time as the governor and the state and others. Because there are turnout makers and turnout takers. Turnout makers are not city council members. Turnout makers are governors. Turnout makers are presidents. Right? People come out to vote in those big elections, and while they're there, they're going to vote for everything else. Now, there's arguments on whether local voters who are more tuned should be the only decision makers. That's why it have it. You know, the argument was we have an April primary so our electorate doesn't get diluted by people who don't pay attention to local politics. That's an argument. There's also an argument that these people are disenfranchised because they're not paying attention. They're going to work. They're raising their kids. They vote. Voting isn't seen as something they're excited to do. It's seen as a civic duty, something I got to do, like jury duty, right? And so if I got to do it, I'd rather do it once instead of doing it multiple times, right? So different philosophies there. And then there's also 2008 that we got to talk about. 2008, the election of President Barack Obama. Now, President Obama was when he was elected, that's when people began to talk about the new American majority, the rising American electorate. Now, what is the rising American electorate versus the traditional American electorate? Well, in national elections, the traditional American electorate had won every presidential election up until Barack Obama. And the traditional American electorate were traditionally straight, married, over 30, white, male. Traditional electorate, right? Women if they're married and white and straight, right? The rising American electorate was under 30, people of color, LGBTQ, right? That was the rising American electorate. So the very first time that the rising American electorate won a national election was Barack Obama. And they've won every election since then. The rising American electorate has won that coalition, the new coalition, has won even when Trump won, they won every national election since then, that demographic. Now, once that happened, there was a whole movement of people who were inspired. I am one of them, who were inspired to step up and lead and run for office. This was the first time they cast a ballot and saw something happen in D.C. Otherwise, every other time you vote and you lose, right? This time you voted and you won. And so a lot of people, that's when the bug bit them. You saw more people, younger people, people of color, stepping up to run for local office and state assembly than ever before, right? That was happening while at the same time, Long Beach was having its own awakening, right? And then Long Beach realigned our elections finally in 2018, I think. We voted to realign. Was it 2018?
No, it's later. But in 2018, there's charter reform. And in thinking about
charter reform went to 3 terms. We got rid of the write-in.
Is there an interplay there?
I don't know that the interplay.
Well, also there in charter reform, there's a redistricting commission versus however redistricting.
Okay, we'll talk about redistricting separately.
So
we just had our first election with the new district, so it's hard to say whether that has had a big impact yet. But let's talk about realigning elections.
Yes.
I thought that happened in 2018. Didn't the council decide to do that?
No,
2020?
It happens in 2021, and I think it starts in 2022.
It started in 2022, but we voted on it in
2021.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right. So, city council makes the decision to realign elections because the attorney general makes the decision and says that if your turnout is below a certain threshold because you're not aligned with the state, you have to do it. Right?
Oh.
You have to do it. Some cities argued and fought. Look this up. Some cities argued and fought and said, I don't want to align with others. You can't make me, right? And then Long Beach said, no, that's the right thing to do. And Mayor Garcia was big on this. And we did. So the city council voted to align our elections per the direction of the attorney general. And then we put it on the ballot to codify it. We put it on the ballot to codify that in case a Supreme Court decision or something overturned it. So that's what happened in Long Beach. Now, when that happened, the discussion about why would you ever want to try to run for citywide office changed. It completely changed because it showed that the electorate was much more balanced now. And so, the time came. There was a lot of chatter on whether Robert Garcia, who was a rock star mayor, whether he was going to get appointed to the U.S. Senate, whether he was going to get appointed when Biden won, whether he was going to be appointed to the administration, the cabinet. It was a lot of talk, right? So the chatter started really in 2020. Is Robert going to go? I had already been elected vice mayor in 2016. and then I got reelected vice mayor in 2020, right? So I was twice the vice, right? Vice mayor is like seen as a leader on the council, right? You got to get five council members to vote you as vice mayor. So, that's, it's a good feather in your cap, and it's a good feather in your cap to have, but also it's a great ballot designation if you plan to run for mayor. So when Robert Garcia won the mayor's race, he was vice mayor. So his ballot designation was vice mayor. And it's a good indicator on where the council is. Who does the council want, right? So all of that chatter was out there when the vice mayor's race came up in 2020. And, and I ran for vice mayor in 2020. And it was a contentious vice mayor's race, and it was very bitter. Traditionally, vice mayor's races, after you figure out, they're always contested. No one's ever unanimous. But I can't remember anyone being unanimous until Cindy Allen won, which we're a much more cohesive council now, right? But typically, after a vote is taken, yes or no, on a person, we vote again to show support for the new vice mayor. We all vote together. In this race, that didn't happen. Like council members in 2016, council members got up and stormed out, right? And 2020 it was very bitter, and the election was over the phone because it was COVID. So folks were very, very bitter on that one, and I think the tension was that people knew Robert was going somewhere, right? And so, became vice mayor. The conversation finally, the shoe drops. Congressman Lowenthal announces that he's retiring. And it's all but, a foregone conclusion that Robert Garcia is the heir apparent, right? Here goes the phone calls. Rex, what are you going to do, right? I had heard other names. I'd heard that Patrick O'Donnell was going to run for mayor and all these other things. And, you have, since no one from this side of town has ever won before, a big challenge is even in like convincing your supporters that you have a chance and that you're viable. And so before that happened, it was like a race before the race. So I was up for re-election, and I was raising money for re-election, and there were some expectations I needed to raise money. You don't need to raise $100K to run for re-election, but the chatter was out. Is Rex going to run? So we needed to raise a bunch of money. So we raised about $175,000 and for re-elect. It was like, wow, he's got some energy. There's some momentum behind this guy. That blew the fundraising record out like by double, like the fundraising record out of the window on city council. And then
city council anywhere in the city of Long Beach?
Yeah. So I held the city council fundraising record, 176,000 raised, and that was raised before December. An election is typically in June, right? Mm-hmm. So we broke the record. So basically, election. Robert makes his announcement. The holidays are coming. And so I took some time to, I said I would make a decision after the holidays. I'll make an announcement what my intentions are after the holidays. Hung out with family. Got my things in order. Made some key phone calls. Hey, if I do this, are you gonna be with me? Put together a website. Worked with the guy that did all my videos on my different policy initiatives on council, and was like, hey, if we're gonna announce, we need a great announcement video. He's like, dude, and I didn't have a lot of money at the time. And he's like, I got you. My guy Donovan, he's great. And we put together a video right there in that living room. It was called Thrive Together. And, it had scenes of like Long Beach and my family, at the forest wetlands that we restored, Sal's Gumbo Shack, paramedic rescues. Like, it was really an ode to all the stuff we had done. But really, it was like we want to take this same kind of empowerment and leadership and expand this sense of unity to the whole city. That was the feeling. And so, as soon as the new year came in, boom, dropped it. Right? I'm running for mayor. Right? Join me. Boom. So, we jumped in the mayor's race, and rest is history. I don't know if you want me to go into all that, but the rest is history.
Not hard at all.
It was hard. It was hard, but my family was very encouraging. I really tried to bring the coalition together. And so, you saw it was a very diverse campaign. I was really proud that, like, as soon as we came out the gates, Lena Gonzalez endorsed me right out the gate. Never forget that. Janice Hahn endorsed me on day one. The firefighters were my first endorsement when I ran for city council. I didn't even know they were putting this out. They tweeted their letter of endorsement on Twitter the day I announced my campaign. And the press picked it up and said, wow, who is this guy? You got the firefighters endorsement day one? They were the first endorsement in the mayor's race. And so you never forget who's with you first, right? And my council colleagues were super strong. I'll tell you, very strong. Roberto was strong. Cindy and Sully were new council members, and they threw down. Mary was great. Like, my council colleagues really did a whole lot. And, I think the race represented, and Robert endorsed me at the end. He endorsed. But I think it showed that the coalition was strong. It really went back to those things I learned in the labor movement early about just valuing everybody and the power of the coalition. It came through for us because I did not raise more money than my opponent. They hit me because I had to for me to raise money. Long Beach, the limits were very low. It was $900. I raised $1.2 or $1.3 million between the primary and the general at $900 a pop in like 11 months. So I had to go to like fraternity brothers. I had to go to like mayors that I knew in other cities around the country, like, help me, right? Because a lot of the political money traditionally, the old guard money, was locked up in Council District 3. I didn't have access to that, right? So, and races are very, very expensive, but also kept it principled. I was the only candidate that didn't take oil money because we're in a position where we're getting off of oil, and you got to be clear-eyed and focused, right? You can't be distracted. And like, my loyalties to the residents and making sure that this transition is clean and that we are not, our focus is not divided, we're not conflicted. That became a big issue. Homelessness was the big issue of the race. I think the fact that I built the city's first citywide homeless shelter showed that I had delivered results. And then the public health in general folks had worked with me for many years, so they knew I'm going to lift up our health department. Like, homelessness we should not play games and oversell that we're going to change this thing overnight. Like, this takes dedication and focus. It takes building up capacity, which requires partners. Like, it's hard work, and you got to be able to take some hits. If you're out telling people you can change it overnight, you probably shouldn't be a leader. Anyway, we don't need to get into all that. All right, what else?
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Do you want me to stop the recording or still?
Well, do you have a question?
You want to take a break?
Sure. Well,
let's take
how long.
Yeah, let's take a little break.
Okay, I'm ready.
Good.
Good to go. All right. What's next?
Would you talk about the impact of the involvement of regional labor movement in local politics versus when the local unions get involved?
Mm-hmm. So historically, I would say back in the day, labor was more of a LA thing, and it would parachute into Long Beach on election day or election day weekend. Back when voting was on one day, a bunch of people show up, knock on doors, and that was the extent of it in terms of political action.
And what unions?
Well, it depends. Okay. So local unions, police and fire have always been engaged. Police and fire has always been engaged. The IM has always been engaged. But I'm talking about like when the region would kind of the broader movement, the service workers, the private sector unions, all of them, it really manifested in one day. GOTV. GOTV was like a holiday. GOTV weekend. Saturday through Tuesday. And if you worked in the labor movement, if you're a member, don't plan anything. GOTV weekend. This is before elections. Vote by mail became so big, and election season, 2 weeks or 10 days, the vote centers are open. It was really GOTV weekend. That was the big thing. And folks would come into Long Beach, and many folks actually lived here, but they weren't that engaged here, right? So it was not seen as like a local effort. That changed. There was, discussions about um, and there were discussions about having a more sustained focus. There was a coalition called the Coalition for Good Jobs and Healthy Communities. Steve Neal was a part of that coalition. It was largely driven by Lane and the Fed, and there was a Long Beach strategy. And I wasn't involved in creating the Long Beach strategy. This was before my time. But Steve was a part of the Long Beach strategy. It was like Steve was involved in the coalition. Steve lived here. He was on different boards here. And it was like Steve getting elected to city council kind of was proof that the Long Beach strategy could work. And it was about, Long Beach is a big city and big port, and we're a union town, right? But really the way that we think was not very pro-worker, right? And so over time, the engagement began to be less than just show up from one weekend. It was like, let's sustain, let's build up, power in the communities. Let's knock on doors. Let's register voters. Let's do all these different things. I think when Steve came in, that kind of opened up the playbook. You started seeing more folks get elected out of the labor movement. I was in student government first and all that, but I spent time in the labor movement, right? And I think this is the first time we've had a mayor out of the labor movement, right? And I think that's a good thing. Labor was seen as maybe a not local thing, but we're all local. All residents, these my neighbors up here, they're all union. My next door neighbor, I ran into her at a Martin Luther King Day breakfast because she's a union steward and she's an ER nurse and she's active in her union. And you just never know, right? Where how people make their living. But I think there's a little bit of a renaissance, and Long Beach has shown that what we do helps shape the region. We were real leaders during the pandemic. For example, hero pay, frontline grocery workers. We were having a hard time keeping toilet paper on shelves and getting people to work, right? So Long Beach did hazard pay. It was a scary time. We did hazard pay for pharmacists and grocery workers. We got sued by the California Grocery Association. We fought it. We won, and we were the first city to do hero pay, and then it spread to 250,000 workers across California because Long Beach did it. During the pandemic, we did recall and retention rights. So if your hotel went out of business or whatever during the pandemic, when it came back, you had first right of refusal on your job. We provided that right. We were the first city to do it. Recall and retention rights in Long Beach. Sick days. We were the first city in California to do sick days. Now it's statewide law. It started here in Long Beach. I carried that motion, right? Mary carried the motion on hero pay. I carried the motion on recall and retention and sick days. And so it just shows that, and you can be progressive and you can think about workers and you can make sure that, we look out for humans and people, and the economy's not going to fall out, right? We just have to create a table where everyone has a seat at the table and everyone can eat, So that's sort of the legacy that labor has created, right? Like labor has gotten more and more involved, and it's really local voices. I would even say that like the head of the County Federation of Labor, Yvonne Wheeler, that was our neighbor in North Long Beach. She was on my slate back in 2008 for delegate. She's the head of the largest labor organization, County Federation of Labor in America, right? And she's a Long Beach resident, So yeah, labor's definitely changed the face of politics in Long Beach, and I think for the better.
I wanted to ask a little bit about how you saw then Mayor Robert Garcia's role in some of the changes that we've been talking about.
Sure. So Robert, so I would say Robert on election alignment, he was a big champion on that. That helped open up the door. Robert's election in and of itself was a watershed moment for the city. First LGBTQ, first Latino. So there wouldn't be a Rex Richardson if it wasn't a Robert Garcia. You got to say that. And there's some really interesting parallels. Me and Robert Garcia went to the same high school, Covina High. People don't realize 2 mayors back-to-back graduated from Covina High. He went to Long Beach State. I went to Cal State Dominguez Hills. He became student body president. I became student body president. He was the youngest council member in history, and then I beat him by a year. he became the youngest vice mayor, and then I got him by 2 years, right? And he became mayor, and I became mayor. There's been these parallels, but I didn't know him through all that time. I didn't meet Robert until like, really, I didn't really get to know Robert until he and Steve both served on the council together. So you know, this wasn't like planned or coordinated. Mm-hmm. He worked at Arby's in high school. It happened to be the same Arby's that my mom worked at. Different time periods, but they both worked on those, you know, Arby's sandwiches at the same time. You know, the exact same Arby's.
So how do you see yourself as different or similar to your successors, your mayoral successors?
Predecessors?
Predecessors.
I think Bob was a mayor during a season where it was like economy was tough, budget was tough. He was a CEO. He, you know, powered right through it, you know, and brought the city through. It was leaner, but we made it through those ugly times. Robert, you know, it was, I think his legacy is going to be not his first term. It's going to be the pandemic and the second term. It's going to be that leadership during that moment. I think that'll be his legacy. I think I'm the recovery mayor. I believe in housing and jobs and you know, putting food on the table and roof over the head for people. It's my story. It's, you know, when I moved to Southern California, we didn't have a lot. I slept on the couch. My mother had one bedroom. My sister and brother had the other bedroom, but we made it work. I believe in economic mobility. My mother would tell us, like, go out, get an education, you know, be successful, be hungry, humble, be smart, you know, things like that. And so for me, I think, you know, my values are everyone should have access to the opportunity to thrive. I think that, you know, our city has immense resources. We just need to organize it in a way that is centered on people. Young people should have opportunities. We're opening up City Hall. One of the first ballot measures I'm championing is civil service reform to change how we bring people in. I think we need to definitely open up the playbook and bring more people in to local government. So,
how do you think you operate similarly or differently than Garcia or Foster?
That's tricky because I'm a new mayor. I'm gonna piss them both off. But I would say I may be a little more direct than Robert on certain issues. I think I'm way more progressive than Bob was. You know, I think both of them were generally good leaders for the time that they were in office. And I think, again, the challenge that I have is the recovery. I think people expect, you know, cities to snap back, but things have changed. Office space, like we built all that office space downtown. People are working from home. So the restaurants at lunchtime, they're not getting the lunchtime crowds they used to have. So it's going to take time to think through, what are we going to use that space for? People say convert it to residential, but residential, people want their windows to open. Office building windows don't open. Like, these are things you got to, like, think through, right? Homelessness is bigger since the pandemic. We're a health department city. We're handling it, but I think people expect overnight results. I'm more of a, let's address the root causes. Like, I remember what it was like being housing unstable, you know, going to 14 schools across 5 states. I remember that. You know, my little brother's housing unstable. You know, I've seen him struggle with, you know, rehab and things like that. So I empathize, but also I know that short-term fixes are not the answer. Whereas we're in an environment that, you know, Bob didn't have to deal with social media the way we deal with social media, right? I was just reflecting on just the state of press that we're dealing with. I remember when our biggest problem with press in North Long Beach was, like, at any time something bad happened, they called it North Long Beach. Whenever something good happened, it was Long Beach or it was Bixby Knolls, right? It was like we wanted our credit. But we had people like Harry Salsagaver we could call. We could, if we really made the case and told our stories well, we could do something about it. Today it's different. Everything is subscription-based model. So you get to read a headline and then you have to subscribe. So they want the headlines to be just, you know, very extreme. And unfortunately, positivity doesn't make good headlines. Drama and corruption and all those things make good headlines. And so the periodicals in Long Beach now, it's, you know, very clickbaitish, right? And so like if I want to, like I'm promoting civil service reform right now. We're going through the process. It's very different than the last time the city attempted it. We're preserving every right city employees have. We're going through the process to even make it stronger. We're going to add preferences to where people who live in our city or go to school in our city can get a city job easier. We'll be the first city in the country to do it. There hasn't been one article actually explaining the measure. There's been 3 articles explaining which bureaucrats have a problem with it, though. Think about shouldn't you establish what the measure is before you talk about who the critics are and the politics of it? Well, that doesn't pay the bills. That's the state of our local press right now. So we've got to figure out how to, actually build pride in our community. How are people going to feel proud and enlisted in the support of their community when they can't get good news? Because they don't want to pay $9.99, right? How do you do that? That's a challenge we're going to have to figure out. I think there needs to be a renaissance of public news, right? NPR, NPR and PBS and all that. It's time to bring it back. But at the same time, as the mayor, you can't do anything. You want to inspire people to do it, right? You can't be out there doing it. But I'll tell you, it is not good for a city the size of Atlanta, larger than St. Louis and New Orleans and Miami and Cincinnati and on and on and on, to not have a robust local media, right? That is not biased. I'll give you an example. The Long Beach Post does not even accept op-eds. They haven't for years. The community cannot even do a letter to the editor. You can't do a guest commentary. As the mayor, you can't do it. To the Press Telegram's credit, you may not always agree with their editorial position, but their professionalism, their standards very high, and they do letters to the editor in the Grunion and the Press Telegram, and they do guest commentaries. So it's unfiltered. You can say, you don't have to agree. They don't have to agree with you. You don't have to agree with them, but you can put your position out there to their credit. So that's one thing that Long Beach is going through right now. And it's difficult to even get their history right. We're talking to the Historical Society. The history, the perspective's right. We're in a really, really interesting moment. We've got, we just reclaimed our position as the number 1 port in America in terms of overall TEUs. Number 2 in cargo. We just beat New York, New Jersey. We've got the fastest growing space cluster in America with Space Beach. We just hosted a Space Beach Law Lab conference over the weekend at the Queen Mary, right? These are really cool, exciting things that we just did, that we're doing right now. No one knows. We're getting Michelin stars and our food scene's like blowing up right now. Music's coming back to the city organically and through bringing venues like amphitheaters and bringing new life to the arena. That's happening. That's good for our restaurants, right? In a year, and as much as early as a year, you're going to start seeing 40 concerts a year come back, right? If you compare our downtown to any downtown in California of our size, I don't want to name names of cities, right? But look, Northern California, Southern California, any downtown of our size, right? Around 500,000. Whose downtown is recovering faster? Who's managing homeless better? It's not even close. It's Long Beach, right? But you wouldn't be able, the local resident would not know any of that because of the situation with our local press.
Yep.
It's unfortunate.
We don't have 3 TV stations, 2 daily newspapers. We have no radio.
We'd be the biggest city. We'd be the biggest city in like 38 states.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't have it. So that is, people wonder what keeps the mayor up at night. I do a lot. Like I spoke at Bobby Smith Elementary School, went to a Long Beach State basketball game, spoke to McBride High School, all this week. Met with the student body president of Cal State Dominguez Hills. Met with I met with the governor's office about the public safety corps, and then Governor Gray Davis about housing. Met with an assembly member about housing. I met with the biggest city, mayors of the biggest cities in California. Met with 4 businesses, attended a conference. All that was this week, and had the time to go to my kids' open house, and go to a soccer game, and take them to see Dune in the theaters this week. And I pressure washed the patio, and I changed my own garbage disposal this week, and I just replaced my doorbell to the Ring. I did that this week, right? Like I did all of that. All this positivity is happening in our city, and nobody knows.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is like a period of extraordinary. It's an extraordinary moment in our city.
Yeah.
Extraordinary leadership, people stepping up, all of that, and no one knows because of the state of our local press. So we've got to. So that's one of the things that keeps me up at night, right? How do you enlist people to make a difference in the community when all they see is clickbait about bad things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I know that probably wasn't on the script for today, but
No, it's fine.
No, but it's true. I've had to subscribe to some news articles to try and even be able to click on things for my own Long Beach like historical context, and it's the same thing. And now I get emails, and this is like, oh, 2 people hit and run or something. It's all that comes up in my
Feed.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I don't see.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you have follow-ups?
I guess, well, I already answered that because my question was how the press is different now in relationship to like the city council and public office, because it's always been historically tied to one another.
Yeah. Well, it's different. I mean, I think overall trust in public leaders is probably at an all-time low. We went through the period of QAnon, Trump, January 6th. All that stuff is like eroded public trust in government. And local government, in my opinion, is the best because it's where the rubber meets the road. That's where you can drive down the street and see, a dumped mattress and pick it up. You can see a vacant lot and say, I want to build housing there and build it, or a skate park or whatever, right? Like we're the implementers. We actually do work, right? Not that anyone else doesn't do work, but we do the work that matters. And unfortunately, we have the burden of if we fail, if we don't get the job right, it reflects on your entire city, basically. So we have a responsibility to, deliver results. Where I don't know that expectation is there. You can spend, years, 8 years, 12 years. You can spend 12 years in the legislature and not have very much to show for it tangibly. So I think that's kind of where we are right now. So it's a challenge, but I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic about our prospects. I think we'll be okay.
Thank you. I think that we're at a good stopping point.
Oh, you didn't ask me about
What did we miss? Tell us.
I don't remember. What was on your list?
Labor. Oh, your employment with Crown Castle. That's the only thing that I have written down.
So city council is part-time. So I was elected in 2014. I couldn't be the chief of staff anymore. So I needed to work. So I initially went back to SEIU for about 6 months while I was on city council, just to kind of through the transition. And then after that, I landed a job in San Diego. It was a company called Renovate America. And it was a company called Renovate America. Hang on. And, great office, but was able to work remotely from Long Beach. So most of my first term worked there, and I started a small business. It was basically, I had a bunch of family members who were truck drivers, and I bought a couple trucks and let them run the trucks, right? And, it was, we were in the process of having 2 kids in one term and all that, so it was hard to manage. So eventually I got rid of those trucks. But yeah, on city council, being part-time, at city council you have to work, and I have a young family, so I did that. Second term I worked at Crown Castle, Fortune 100, publicly traded company, basically telecommunication infrastructure. So it's like the biggest company you've never heard of. So your cell phone, when, the Verizon commercials, can you hear me now? Well, there's fiber under the ground and small cell units and cell towers that are owned by different companies. Well, Crown Castle basically owns much of that infrastructure. One of the biggest providers in America, and their customers are Verizon and AT&T and those guys. And basically, so I held that down for most of my second term. I was government affairs, so I managed sort of this LA County region outside of Long Beach. Pretty good company. So I was able to, work in the private sector, be pretty engaged. But to be clear, I was never a lobbyist. I worked for the company. A lobbyist is somebody who's hired to go be right. That came up during the campaign. Oh, he's a lobbyist. Well, where do they get that from? Well, they get that from some cities have registration. We have lobbyist registration in Long Beach, but some are more stringent. Particularly 2 cities require a lobbyist to register, but also a company contact to be on the same registration card. So when I ran for mayor, they went and pulled they do all this background on you, and they pulled the registration card where I'm signed on. Clearly it shows I'm not the lobbyist, but they put a lot of money behind the campaign. So even today, people think they elected a lobbyist as mayor, which is not illegal or a bad thing if they were to do that, but it's just not factual, right?
Right.
If I was a lobbyist, I'd own it, but I wasn't, right? I worked for one company, right? And I would do, legislation, policy framework, things like that, but wasn't a lobbyist. But I did that. It was a great company. Great company. But now as mayor, the charter prohibits, outside work. So I am a dad and I am mayor. And honestly, I don't have much time to do much else. At some point, I'm going to go in the classroom. So I had a couple conversations with Cal State Dominguez Hills about teaching leadership, or I might go to, Long Beach State or something. But at some point, I'm going to go in the classroom. I feel like I have stories to tell. And I've kept this tradition, like every student body president at Cal State Dominguez Hills, and I've extended it the last couple years to Long Beach. They always come in and meet with me. And in some of them I've hired, some of them become interns. One student body president is now the head of the Uptown Business District in North Long Beach, right? He was an intern for me. So I try to keep the connection to the young people. So that's been kind of my employment history. So it's mostly labor, then government, but when I served, I went to the private sector. So I like having experience in all of them. Experience in private sector. I can talk the talk when I go in a business room. I can talk the talk when I go into a labor table. Good.
All right. We missed we missed a lot, but we also got a lot.
Let's see. Family?
And we can... Sure.
Let's see. I told you, me and Nina, we met in college. We got married at Long Beach Museum of Art. Alina and Mila were born at Long Beach Memorial. Initially, we lived over by Coolidge Park, but after Mila was born, we bought this place. We kept that place over there. So, we're landlords. But we just built our life here. She got her doctorate during the pandemic at SC. Actually, did she finish during the pandemic? She finished her doctorate, which was incredible. And she's now she left USC a year ago and came to Long Beach City College. So, all right, you guys got all my info.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. That's what it was. My accomplishments as a council member.
Yes.
Is this even on? This one? Yeah, it's on. That's what it was.
Yes.
It's a lot of good stuff.
Yes, it is. Tell us about how you see your accomplishments as councilman.
Well, like I mentioned, Steve teed up a lot of stuff, but we got the Michelle Obama Neighborhood Library built and open and named. The Doris Topsy Elvert Center at Houghton Park. So a new community center named after the first African-American councilwoman in Long Beach. People wonder, why is it not in the 6th district? Well, when you're citywide, she was vice mayor. She was the first. That's citywide history. You're not limited to a district.
And harbor commissioner.
And harbor committee. You're not limited to a district when you make citywide history. The Ron Arias Health Equity Center at the same park, right? So you got Ron Arias, Latino health director, very transformational leader. Right next to Doris Topsy Albert Houghton Park, it becomes a cultural space. Me and Steve together, we built the Uptown Jazz Festival, right? And that has turned into a real staple event for the community. We have done transformational work on open space. The Uptown Open Space Plan was something I championed on City Council. Al's done a great job on open space too. He's got a big open space legacy. Together we did 40 acres at the Forest Park wetlands. Al has done a whole lot in his district, Pops Davenport and Molina Park. But North Long Beach has seen a real open space renaissance, which is big. I led the creation of the Uptown Business District, the formation, as a staff member. Steve and Al were the ones who voted to make it happen. So we all get a little bit of credit on creating the Uptown Business District. But I brought that.
How is that continuously funded? Because is it a bid?
Yeah, it's a bid.
Okay.
Yep.
So business licenses.
Yep, it's a bid. So property is a P bid. So property taxes. So the big P bid. Citywide, I created the Office of Equity as a council member. That was something that I championed back when the word equity was still a little politically sensitive. I created the Veterans Affairs Commission. We did a whole lot of veterans work in North Long Beach, and I felt that was the next national step. So the Veterans Affairs Commission, I actually championed. The Office of Youth Development in the city, I championed that. Measure US, that created the Citywide Youth Fund, I championed that, brought it to council, and ran the campaign to get that passed by voters in 2020.
Women's Commission.
And I haven't even gotten there. I'm talking about as council. That was mayor. I haven't even gotten there yet.
Yeah.
And on council, reformed the Commission on Youth and Families. That was me. And what other legacy stuff citywide as a council member? Liquor store reform was Steve. That's the alcohol misuse abatement ordinance was his, but we took it citywide. The Youth Poet Laureate program I created as a council member. The Racial Equity Reconciliation Initiative, after the unrest in Long Beach, I led that effort, organizing it, pulling it together, led the motion at council, took a lot of hits for that, and that ultimately led to the creation of the Citizen Police Complaint Commission. The new Police Oversight Commission to replace Citizen Police Complaint Commission. That came out of that work.
Can you talk about the difference in the power that the commissions actually have?
Absolutely. So the Citizen Police Complaint Commission investigated complaints when something bad happens. Mm-hmm. This new model is called an auditor-monitor model. So they look at data and trends and all of that in advance before something happens. So they're able to look at use of force or hiring or any sort of operational issue, how we respond to complaints, response times. All of those things can be under the Office of Police Oversight. So it's not just when something bad happens. Their job is to continually advocate and monitor and audit to ensure that we maintain high standards. So it's a big transition from the model we had to the model that we have now. Big deal, big difference.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about the lack of teeth in the former.
Yeah. Well, it all reported to the city manager. There was no independence. This one is completely independent of the city manager. They have their own director of police oversight and a public commission appointed by the mayor. So,
and what can they can? What else can they do?
Well, they have the platform to basically do investigations, to do audits. They do audits, basically. They audit anything in the police department, and that they're able to make actual policy recommendations. So not just this person needs training, right? They can actually say you need to rework your system this way instead of that way. So this is a more modern model. Cities of our size have been moving to this model in California and around America, so it's a big deal. I appointed the first the first director of police oversight, and as mayor, I appointed the Women's Commission, right? The city's first Women's Commission on Women and Girls. So yeah, those are some of the things that are noted that I helped lead. So a lot of that is called the Uptown Renaissance. It started with Started with Steve Neal, but I was the one who kind of really, put the roadmap to the Renaissance out there, really drove it home, and kind of turned that around. And that actually helped make the case for the rest of the city. So there's a whole lot of areas of town that need some of that same focus. We're going to focus on the West Side, Central Long Beach. There's a lot that needs to be done. And should I get the good fortune to remain mayor in 2026, I'll be the Olympics mayor.
Very exciting.
Yeah. And we're doing
super fun.
An Elevate 28 investment plan. It's our capital investment plan. Between Measure A is about 40% of this plan, but everything else, gas tax and others, turns into about almost a $750 million plan to update our streets, to build, sports complexes and cultural centers, and Cambodia town signs, all that stuff to really highlight our city and get us in tip-top shape in advance of the 2028 Olympics. And the good news is we're just investing in ourselves. We're not actually building facilities for the Olympics. We're spending our money on our own parks and our own facilities that we get to benefit from. Right. All right.
Government investment makes a difference.
It does.
Drives the economy.
Right. Yes,
At
it
all
does.
levels. Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.